every, I kind of like things to be like, oh, here's this list. I'll check things off the list.
I'd like to call this meeting of the Orange County Board of Education to order. And I need a motion to enter closed session for the reasons so stated on the agenda.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. All right, let's move into closed session. Thank you much.
far as I know, EOCs aren't changed. They're like second to third week of May.
And that's what I do. I just take a few out and cook it.
We ready
Did
to
you get
go?
the sheet?
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Orange County Board of Education to order, please. Welcome to everyone that's here tonight. It's nice to see students here. We always like that. We will start with our public charge. Orange County Board of Education pledges to its citizens to conduct its business in a courteous and productive manner, showing respect for fellow board members, staff, and citizens. The board asks its citizens to conduct themselves with the same courtesy toward both school personnel and each other. A moment of silence will be observed before each meeting. In addition to the moment of silence, the board will recite the Pledge of Allegiance. The board asks that you check your cell phones and other electronic devices to be certain that they are either turned off or on vibrate to avoid interruption of the meeting. And at this time, we will stand and have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will now observe our moment of silence. Okay, thank you very much. We begin our meeting tonight with recognitions.
Good evening. We are going to kickstart our recognitions for the evening and talking about our Disability Awareness Week and Disability Awareness Month. So I'm going to bring Ms. Connie Crimmins, our Executive Director of Exceptional Children, up to give you some information about celebrations this week.
All right, good evening, Board, Dr. Jones, staff, and the community at large. I am here to raise up that this week, March 18th through 22nd, has been designated by Orange County Schools as Disability Acceptance Week. Thank you to all Orange County schools for embracing all people with disabilities. And looking around, we are there. Today was Orange to lift up attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and so it's wear orange. But I look around and I see many people who have participated, so thank you so much. As you know, words and actions matter when we recognize groups of people. I want to take a moment and read these statements to highlight the difference between awareness and acceptance. Awareness is knowing that you have a classmate with a disability. Acceptance is inviting him, her, or they to hang out with you. Awareness is simply realizing that someone has a challenge. Acceptance is engaging in real conversation with them. Awareness is seeing someone with a disability do something you maybe didn't expect. Acceptance is telling them that they are awesome, cheering them on, or working together with them. Awareness is saying you have a friend with a disability. Acceptance is truly being a good friend to them. Awareness is appreciating the gifts and challenges of those with different abilities. Acceptance is volunteering your time to help. Awareness is agreeing with these statements. Acceptance is sharing them. Awareness does not imply doing anything different. Acceptance is taking action. While it is good to be aware, we must strive to accept and empower children and adults of all abilities. Everyone has strengths and challenges and gifts to share. So I hope that these statements resonate with you and will help define acceptance versus awareness. And just thank you for, and remember to wear blue tomorrow to show your acceptance of people with speech impairments. Thank you, and we appreciate, on behalf of all the staff that works with students with disabilities, we appreciate you raising this up and celebrating with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Purcell, Vice Chair Richmond, members of the board, Dr. Jones. This evening, we would like to recognize our winter sport team state recognitions. We have quite a few. I want to first start with our Orange High School swim team. So please come on up, Coach Guy. Please come on up as well. Thank you. The winter sports season had a ton of success. In particular, we had winter teams that had success at the state level. Tonight, we'd like to take a moment to recognize several teams that competed at the state championship level. First, we have the Orange High School swim team, a group that gets in the water 5 days a week at 6:15 a.m. Led by Coach Ron and Christy Geib, the Orange High School swimming team finished the 2024 swimming season as state champion runners-up. A whole list of accomplishments throughout this season. First, starting with, they were conference champions, both the men and women. We have the Conference Swimmer of the Year for the men, Luke Roman, and for the women, Katie Bell Sykes. We were the regional runner-ups for the men and women, state runner-up for the women. Women's 3A State Swimmer of the Year, Katie Bell Sykes, and Women 3A State Sportsmanship Award, Katie Bell Sykes. The Orange High School broke several records throughout the season as well. For the men, 3 records were broken throughout the season out of 11. And for women, 7 records that were broken throughout the season as well. They also get it done in the classroom, right? So scholar athlete recognition, we have the State Association Scholar Athlete Award for both men and women. The women's team has been the top scholar team in the state the last 3 years. And they've also received the National Interscholastic Swim Coaches Association Gold Level Award, and that is an award where the team GPA must be 3.75 or higher. So they're getting it done in and out of the water. Coaches have, Ron and Christy Gobb have coached Orange High School team for the last 5 years. Coach Ron, our head coach, has won Coach of the Year 4 out of those 5 years. And I'd like to bring him up. He'd like to talk about a memorable moment throughout this season. So there were plenty, but he will recognize just one.
Thank you all very much for having us. It's nice to see my swimmers. I haven't seen them in like a month since the season ended, so it's nice to see the group here, and thank you all for having us today to say a few things. First of all, I'd like to thank Orange High School, our principal Johnson, and our new AD, Jason Knapp. They've done a phenomenal job supporting us throughout the season so we could have a successful program. And so first most, that's important that we thank them, and thank you guys for supporting them so that we can be here. He talked about a lot of the accomplishments and a lot of the swim accomplishments. We had tons of them this year. It was a lot of fun, the season. It was nice to get to be with this group. If you don't know much about swimmers, they're good people. And so, like I said, we had a lot of good participants on our swim team. And again, academic-wise, we're not athletes if we're not students first. And so that's certainly a focus of our team. And they did a very nice job. We also have a Moorhead Kane Scholar for next year that's on our team. And then, you know, that's always something that we're super proud of and being able to recognize. A memorable moment from this year. So about our swim team, we had 6 state champions this year. And so just take a second here. We got Riley White, we got Zoe, we got Piper, we got Luke, and we got Katie Bell and Ainsley. So there's 6 of them that won state championships this year. And one of the events we had was a relay. And so it was a 200 medley relay. So each of the 4 participants swim a different stroke. And so we mixed up the order how we normally had it and had some stuff. And so we were basically trailing for that last 50-yard swim. And we actually had one of our underclassmen, Miss Piper White here, who found it in herself to just overcome that anchor leg and came and out touched. And it was literally like a boom, boom type of thing, and we end up winning that state champion, and that started our role and able to do a couple more relays, some individual state champions, and Luke won his event. So it was just a phenomenal, the whole place just exploded, you know, the whole crowd. There's a great picture out there, if you hadn't seen it, of the girls behind the blocks jumping and celebrating, the guys as well, just celebrating that relay. So it was certainly a pretty phenomenal moment, and we appreciate it, and thank you guys. One thing I would say here before I leave the podium is hope to get into open session here, and I missed the sign up, but we want to talk a little bit about the Sportsplex and about the county support and the school system, and our ability to effectively have a swim team every year because of the cost associated with having a swim team. And again, our county-owned facility, the Sportsplex, is something we'd like to discuss. So I'll save that for hopefully after this thing. But nothing to take away from these guys. This is just part of our group. We had 30 kids this year, phenomenal group, and we're going to miss a lot of them for next year. But we got a lot of them coming back too as well. So thank you all very much for having us.
Coach did mention to me that he will return about 22, 24 swimmers. No pressure at all, right? No pressure to get back to this podium next year and bring that state championship home. We're going to stay in the water and go to Cedar Ridge High School. Come on up. We would like to recognize from Cedar Ridge swimmer Sophia Stennett, and also our head coach is here, Amanda Jones. Sophia's accomplishments include a third-place finish in the 100 backstroke at the state championship, swim championships as well. Coach Jones earned also Men's Coach of the Year in the conference this year. Again, another group that jumps in the water at 6:15 a.m. To get their practices in. Coach Jones excited about where the program is going, and I've asked her to share some memorable moments as well throughout the season and about Sophia.
Hi, thank you guys for having us today. I have a few comments to make about Sophia. She is an outstanding student athlete, both in and out of the water. She goes to our required morning practices, again at 6:15 in the morning, without any sort of complaints, in addition to her 3-hour-long practices she has every single day with her year-round team. And those are 6 days a week, so she really puts in the work to get to swim at the level that she does. On top of her dedication to her sport, Sophia balances a rigorous academic coursework schedule, taking a full class. You take full AP and college classes, yes? I just wanted to confirm. Sorry, I didn't get to before coming in today. But she's taking college classes, AP classes, while swimming 3 or 4 hours every single day during the winter sports season. Despite her demanding schedule, Sophia always brings a smile with her wherever she goes, and that positive energy is seen throughout the team's dynamic. I truly believe her ability to inspire and lead others is a huge reason that our relay teams continue to break school records season after season. This season, we had 2 school records broken with our relays, and she broke an individual record with her 100-yard backstroke at the state championships. So I'm excited to see what Sophia does her senior year. I'm excited to see her lead the team. And I'm really happy that we're going to be bringing back a lot of swimmers next year as well, about 25 swimmers. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, Board Chair, Ms. Purcell, Vice Chair, Mr. Richmond, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Jones. On February 21st, Governor Roy Cooper honored Black History Month and recognized North Carolina's African-American educators for their dedication to the students and families of North Carolina and their contributions to the state. Governor Cooper and the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission hosted prominent Black educators and community members at the Executive Mansion. It is my honor tonight to announce that one of our very own teachers at Orange High School, Mr. Xavier Adams, was recognized by the governor for his dedication to the students of Orange High School and Orange County Schools. With that being said, I introduce to you, and he's no stranger to you, Mr. Xavier Adams.
Good afternoon, Board, Chair, Vice Board, Superintendent Jones. Thank you for this opportunity to just be recognized by an incredible school district. I've worked in the school district for 4 years. It's been 4 of the best years of my life. I've been truly grateful to be able to work with the families, the students in our community. When I stepped into the Executive Mansion in Raleigh, it was a very surreal feeling. I mean, being recognized beginning teacher of the year for the state was a surreal feeling in 2022. This was also a very surreal feeling for a different reason, mainly because of the fact that I was by far the youngest person in there, and it didn't feel like an honor I was, worthy of. I mean, I've only been teaching for 4 years, and quite literally, there was a woman in the room who was 107 years old. And so to just think about the lifelong contributions of the people in the room in respect to my 4 years felt very humbling. And it also felt like an incredible reminder of the work that I need to dedicate myself to as a career educator, given that that's my goal. And thinking about that, one of the things that I always love to talk about when I get to talk about my classroom is the fact that I was not responsible for bringing the classes that I teach to Orange County schools. There's a long history in our school district, most recently with Brenda McCormick, who taught here for 26 years minority studies in Orange County schools. And so, I was very grateful in 2020 to revitalize those classes, thanks to the work of many students, parents, people a part of the equity team at Orange High School to bring those classes back. But even in thinking about that, I think about the reality that we are in a very fragile moment with public education right now, given this election season. And in no way am I up here endorsing any certain candidates, but the reality is for the entirety of my teaching career, I've always had to defend the legitimacy of my Honors African American Studies class, of my Latin American Studies class, both within the community and even on a political level statewide. And of course, we know the national conversation around this. And so with the upcoming election season, I really implore us to think about being intentional on how to preserve these classes. In my very first year of teaching, House Bill 324 was proposed at the state legislature, which would have limited conversations on race and racism, effectively making me not able to talk about my parents. My parents went to segregated schools in Kansas City, Kansas. I've learned a lot about that history, and had that bill passed, I wouldn't have been able to talk about that experience with my students and the rich communities that my parents, grandparents grew up in. The following year, there was the lieutenant governor created a task force that also was very intentional about trying to silence these conversations. In 2023, House Bill 124 was proposed to again limit these types of conversations. With that, I really encourage us to continue to support the work of cultural studies classes. There's a huge demand for it at Orange High School. I have 4 classes this year. The average size of those classes is 28 students. So there's a deep interest. For a lot of these students, it's either their first time in an honors class or an AP class, and so it does a lot of great work for bringing in underrepresented backgrounds into these upper academic classes. And in fact, there's such a huge demand that every year we have to turn away 60 plus students just because there's only one me, and I also have to teach world history, which is a great opportunity. And so really appreciate y'all's commitment as people invested in public education. Thank you for thinking of the best interest of our students here in Orange County Schools, which I truly think is the best district in our state. So with that said, thank you for this recognition and your time.
Okay, thank you, everyone, for being here tonight, and congratulations to all of our students and to Mr. Adams. I think you probably heard how I found out about this, your honor. So we're very proud to have you here tonight and celebrate with you. And thank you to everyone who is being recognized tonight. We need to have our agenda adoption. So do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I would like to pull policy 3320, the school trips, from consent for discussion.
Okay. Do I have a motion for the agenda with that being pulled?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. All right, next we have public comment.
We will now hear public comments. Speakers will be called in the order in which they signed up. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. Yielding time to other speakers is not permitted. If a speaker has written materials they would like to share, please hand them to our board clerk, Franklin McCune, and he will distribute them to the board. The purpose of public comment is for the board to hear from members of the public, not to engage in back and forth discussions. Per our policy, board members will not respond to speakers during the public comment session. The board greatly values public feedback and welcomes all comments, regardless of viewpoint. However, please be reminded that children are often present at these meetings and that our public comment policy prohibits profanity, vulgarity, and public personal abuse of any person. We ask that all comments be civil, respectful, and free of personal attacks. Any speaker who violates our public comment period or otherwise exceeds the bounds of order or decorum will be given a warning. Continued violations may result in the speaker being ruled out of order, at which point we will move on to the next speaker. We have one speaker tonight, and that public speaker is Gretchen Schmidt.
Good evening, board members. Dr. Jones. I'm going to be speaking on one line found in SB 49 to create awareness of the situation happening in the district, which does not fall in line with the new law and creates an unequitable and exclusive environment among the school communities. In this one line, the law reads, "A parent has the right to direct the upbringing and the moral or religious training of his or her child." Depending on a teacher's decision to use class time to focus on a basic education or not, students are being taught ideas around gender identity and sexuality. During the month of May, especially in 2023, extensive curriculum was sent to faculty, not to parents though, interestingly, to focus potentially daily lessons teaching a certain set of ideas through this LGBTQ curriculum. Ironically, I feel like I need to pause here and state the obvious that I am standing at a Board of Education meeting for the public education of children and youth. This is the only reason for speaking this comment. My own friends in the LGBT community who are adults have shared some of the same concerns. Within this school district, 15 different religious tenets are espoused. And for the majority, they believe deeply held views which are different than what is being taught throughout the year, and especially during the month of May. When does the district plan to give time for all the views to be given equal time? If not, why not? If not, then why not fully publish what is being shared around these ideas, everything that is being shared around these ideas, and let parents know that, especially during the month of May, they're bringing their children not necessarily for a full education, but for partial indoctrination. If we're not going to be teaching all the ideas around a topic, then that's what we have going on around this idea, at least. And as we just heard, we don't want to shut out other ideas. We don't want to make, especially around such an important topic that touches moral and religious beliefs, we don't want to shut out any ideas, right? And so let's think about that across the board, and just an invitation to either stick to education of what the mandate is, or if we're going to step into these ideas, let's give everyone an equal chance. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes public comment.
Okay, we now need to approve our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve that agenda
So moved.
with policy 3320 pulled?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, approved. All right. First up tonight is the capital project options, the 2020, yes, sir?
Madam Chair? Where in the agenda are we moving the policy 3322?
Yes.
We didn't establish that.
You want to do it now?
It should be quick, I hope.
Okay, we can do it now, Franklin. Thank you for that reminder.
So it's
That'd
done,
be
we're doing
okay
it
with
now.
you?
So the request to pull this was mainly so we could waive second read and to see if there's any concerns. This was brought back to the board through policy committee based on concerns about how long some of the specific, if you will, moving violations could impact our families. And after a good discussion with the district staff, review with the attorney, we've narrowed that down to a 3-year window for a violation of certain magnitude. But really, my purpose for pulling it was to waive second reading so parents wouldn't have to wait or be impacted if they have an upcoming field trip. But if there are concerns or comments, obviously, we could address them or send it back to policy.
Yes, ma'am.
No, I think that's a good change, and I'm happy to move the waive of second reading, approve the policy and waive the second reading.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, policy's approved. Okay. Mr. Foster, I'm sorry.
Good evening again, Board. With me this evening, Director of Maintenance Hank McKee, Director of Capital Planning Patrick Florence, and Chris Whitley from the Cummings Group. This evening, we can get to move the slide here. Okay. In our February 29th capital needs meeting, the task from the board was to bring back a recommendation between a K-5 school and K-8 school. As we reflected, we considered certainly both options, and we decided that a new elementary school would be the best option as the elementary level has the greatest need. From an enrollment projection, there's some growth there at the elementary level. And at the middle school level, Orange County School has sufficient space for the foreseeable future in that regard. Financially, we take the $49.5 million that we have to build the 600-student elementary school, and we believe that the remaining funds will help us to address the high priority needs and educational adequacy at the other schools and facilities pretty significantly. With our elementary school. Replacing one of our oldest elementary facilities with the greatest list of needs and provides an opportunity to ensure, again, that we're meeting educational adequacy needs are met, certainly. Reflecting on a K-8, for that matter, will require a larger site, will be more expensive construction, and essentially impacting the funding needed to address the needs of other schools and facilities. So we leaned on and decided that the K-5 would be our best option at this time for the replacement school in our district. On this particular slide, you'll able to see the breakdown of funding overall, where you'll see the cost per project and that which each school would receive, and then ultimately looking at the remaining funds that would go to each school otherwise. Additionally, we were asked to, hey, identify what would the anchor projects be, right, for the bond. And we've listed those for you to see, certainly the replacement elementary school there, Partnership Academy kitchen and cafeteria, and a host of other items within that $120 million bond mark. Now, note that this does not consume the $120 million mark, but these would be the anchor projects from that. And you'll see it on a different slide where you'll see the total breakdown of the $120 million bond projects, capital projects that are listed. But these would, in essence, would be our marquee projects, right, related to the bond itself. The other ask was, hey, can you identify what the CTE, EC, and ARP upgrades might be? Okay, so we've outlined those for you as well in terms of what we will be able to do with the funding. I had great conversations with our CTE leadership as well, and we're able to get some really good ideas based off the funding and what that would look like. The full host of bond projects are outlined in this next slide here, where you're able to see the breakdown of the full $120 million. So again, it includes the anchor projects that were shown earlier, and everything else, all the other funding would go to, based across the district in both school sites as well as our other facilities as well. The final 3 or 4 slides gives you the host of CLP projects per site. Initially, you had it slide by slide per school, but this just gives you an opportunity to kind of see from the remaining projects and the funding that will be associated with each particular school and each particular site that are outlined. So we thought it'd be a little easier way to look at the sites and projects as they're outlined here. Finally, the final slide is one you've seen before, which gives the breakdown of the full funding related to both bond and CLP funding that would be received. So we'll take this time to answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Molly?
Well, I just wanted to share some reactions generally, which is, first of all, I think this presentation is very clear and does a really good job of communicating the plan. I think it's great. I love that you've split out the bond versus CIP, that you've named the anchor projects, that you've put all of the CIP projects, all the schools sort of on those few slides. So overall, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the recommendation for elementary versus K-8 makes sense. My only small suggestions for whenever the next time this is presented. My one suggestion, I think, is on the funding summary page, it could be helpful to have this money column that you have as like 10-year total, and then a column for like estimated annual, it's sort of an annual, because this is a 10-year number, but some of it, like the CIP, is sort of given out every year, right? And the recurring CIP, like all of that is sort of year by year. So just some sort of way to signal this is like a 10-year total.
Right, so ultimately, we will be able to do that. Part of the plan, after getting certainly sign-off, is that a county will need our list of projects, all right? So both Woolpert and the county will be supporting us in terms of phasing based off the funding we will receive for each year, what the projects look like. So we'll then be able to detail the win, for the projects based off the funding that we receive.
Okay.
So we will be able to do that after, like I said, getting sign off and moving forward with presenting those projects
And
to
it
the
will
council.
probably vary year by year depending on the projects and their approach.
And the
for-
amount,
for-
correct.
for-
Yes.
Their approach for how they're going to go forward with the funding.
Correct.
So maybe just on this, just sort of like OCS 10-year funding summary or something, just so it makes that clear. I did have one other question, but I can't remember what it is, so I'll pass to somebody else while I try to remember what it was.
Can I say one thing just to clarify? So when it's done this way, we say that it's a 10-year project, then every year when the money comes in, then you're going to be reporting to the board how much money there is and what that money will be used for that year.
Correct. So just as we bring you each year the list of CIP
Yeah.
projects outlined,
It
right,
will
we'll be
con-
pulling from the overall list so that you can
Okay.
see, 24, 25, this is what we have on the docket in terms of what's going to get done. 25, 20, so on and so forth.
Just wanted to make
Yes.
that clear to everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Smiley?
So I actually have some questions about the elementary school, but I'm going to come back to that. I want to talk about the anchor projects because the conversation that I'm curious about is the conversation with the voters. And we're going to have a conversation with the voters about a $120 million bond and about roughly a 10% tax increase. And one of the things that the commissioners have done is they've said, this is not business as usual, and we are going to modernize our facilities and really modernize our classrooms. So when I look at so I'm just curious about the anchor projects, and I'll comment. So the new elementary school, that's clear. A couple of these projects, like the Grady Brown improvements, the alarm system, these I would call as critical safety improvements for our schools. The CTEC art upgrades are educational improvements in educational adequacy. The fencing and canopies, I think, are safety improvements, right? So I don't know if we need to, because we're going to need to explain to the voters what that is, but I'm not sure how the HVAC life cycle or the Cedar Ridge life cycle flooring got into this list of critical projects, and why Orange Middle School and ALS major improvements, which are about over $15 million each, didn't get into the list of voter-approved, voter-sanctioned bond projects. Because these are the projects that we're going to commit to the voters that we're going to do with their money. The rest of the projects we have discretion with.
Okay.
So I'm just curious why we picked those.
I mean, ultimately, the list of anchor projects that we have here, we thought these were the marquees in terms of, we like to reference from time to time, big and shiny for a voter to see, right? In that way. And not that the others aren't yet. We also want, as you mentioned about voters and spending money, things that they will see. In essence, if we're getting HVAC done, well, I don't see it. The HVAC, improvement or the turnaround for that yet. When it's quite warm in August and there's an issue, we do get those calls that there's an issue with HVAC and needs to be corrected. So it doesn't mean that it's not an anchor project, but in terms of visually seeing projects that are that the voter would want to see and lean on, that's why we identify these as anchor. And not that others aren't, right? But again, in terms of the full $120 million, that's why we listed that other slide that would indicate the full $120 million spending.
So why didn't Orange Middle School, very old school, very desperate need of improvement and investment, why didn't that make the list of anchor projects?
All right, so when we look at Orange Middle School, let me go to their slide. They're getting $16 million worth of funding,
Yes.
okay, overall, based off, again, but when you look at things such as exterior life cycle upgrades, and again, not that it couldn't be added as a quote-unquote anchor project, all right, it's not something that in essence you see, okay? So those items that we had indicated earlier are things that, again, visually, all right, from a voter standpoint and the like, are things that you actually see.
Yeah, it's just which column do we put them in? And which column do the voters want to hear that we're going to upgrade Orange Middle School, or we're going to put in new flooring at our new high school at Cedar Ridge? So that's my concern is, do we have these in the columns that will appeal to the voters? We have complete discretion on the other projects, but the projects that go up in front of the voters we won't have a choice on. They must move forward, and they must move forward as we present them.
All right, and that's why,
So-
again, it's listed in this way in terms of the breakdown by each school. You're able to see how much funding is going there, and detailing exactly the work that's going to be done from both bond and CIP. Yeah, sure.
So with a project like Orange Middle School, it's so much need that if we wait for the funding, as bond money's not all going to come at once. If we wait for that money, it might be a little bit, or we're pushing back one of these other anchor projects. Where if we start taking a little bit at a time, this summer, next summer, these other summers through our capital money, then that's the approach we were taking with this list.
So you want to do some of the Orange Middle School projects before the bond is approved? The bond will be, is going up in November.
Correct. Yep. So when we bring our CIP list in 2 weeks, roughly, there'll be some projects for Orange Middle on that, out of that upcoming 11.
Got it. That's helpful, thank you. Some of these projects are not quite that sexy, so that's all. I'm just really looking for something.
Some of those projects will be at the late end of the bond money, like the Cedar Ridge flooring, what I believe might have been on there. Right now, it's not a need, but at the tail end, it will be, of that 10-year period.
Ms. Smiley? Yeah, I think around the communication around this, related to what Bonnie's saying, I do think when we communicate to folks about this, it'll be important to share all of this other work that we're also going to make happen through through the CIP. If the bond doesn't pass, presumably we would have to relook at both lists and figure out which things to prioritize, but at the moment, assuming it passes, the plan is we're going to fund all of these important improvements to these schools, and we're going to make all of these other improvements with the bond money, and all together it comes into a set of renovations and improvements that are really important, so.
Very, very important, as well as the timeline, as we talked about earlier, in terms of that phasing and what it's going to look like. Hank mentioned too as well. Once they're allocating the funds appropriately, determining what's going to occur when.
So I just think communicating that whole portfolio is important, so folks understand it's not just the marquee projects that are getting done. There's actually a whole bunch of other work that's going to be done too.
And I just want to add, I understand it, the county is putting all the money up front, so that last year we waited, we're still spending the 2016 bond money, but Chapel Hill spent it in year 1 and 2. So that option, we will have the option to get the money faster if that's our plan. But that's going to be up to us to communicate that to the county. So my thing is, I don't want us to wait. I'd say if we need this, let's go get it. Ms. Dole?
Yes, thank you, Chair Purcell. Thank you for this presentation. I echo that there's really good communication in here. And beyond the clear communication, I appreciate how you all have helped us clarify our thinking, and I think we've come together as a board in a way, speaking for myself, but my perception of us coming to some better agreement and understanding. I think it is important that we are moving ahead with assuming the bond funding happens, with the new elementary school, which was, key to the recommendation from Wolpert. And there's just been a lot going on in our district with transition and, there's been a lot. So it took some extra conversation that I think was really worthwhile. And I appreciate the work that your team has put into all those conversations. And it's really come together in a way that's thoughtful. I appreciate your exploring the K-8 option and explaining why the K-5 option seems better. And I am excited to see the educational improvements, as well as some really key safety and facility improvements, like around Grady Brown would be the safety and improvement, but excited for partnership, with the kitchen and cafeteria, excited about all these sound booth improvements and, hydroponics. So there's a lot to be excited about, and I appreciate all your work in shepherding conversations, and I think it sets us up better for when we return to the redistricting conversation. I do want to ask just one question on slide 2 where it says for a new elementary school, location and programming to be determined. And, it says K-5 and we've had conversations about location. So programming, is there anything more specific that we are referring to with that word? Are we talking about whether there's pre-K facilities or not, or what exactly do we mean by programming for a K-5 school?
Okay, not necessarily, and it may have been a little bit of an oversight when we were talking about both K-5 and K-8, so that was probably left on there unintentionally.
gotcha.
Yeah, so.
Thank you.
But we do want to emphasize that the K-5, we are looking at making sure we have some space if we do expand pre-K. And I think the funding would have been the same, 49.5 million.
Thank you.
We'll note that this will obviously be a larger facility, larger than our current elementary facilities, I should say. We're probably talking roughly 75 additional more students that will be able to accommodate, which would obviously lead us to some room for pre-K.
Ms. House?
Yeah, just so I understand this and for the transparency, the school that the campus that we're abandoning is HES, is that correct?
That is not a definitive in terms of which campus. We just know that it is one of our oldest facilities we would want to look at. So a decision would have to be made in terms of which one.
For the bond, I believe we're going to have to, and we have a capital needs work group meeting on Wednesday, but I'm pretty sure we are going to have to be specific with the voters about which school we're replacing. I don't think we could say we're going to just build a school. And also, I think we held the public transparency around this. You're right. So
If that's the case, then
maybe that's a
we're looking to do that now.
conversation that we have to have as a board, but we're going to have it.
Sure.
Ms. Smalley?
Just a couple of other questions. So the sound booth upgrades, is that like middle and high school auditoriums? Is that essentially what?
Yes.
We'll hit all of those as needed, I guess. And then the EC upgrades, let me see how you found it, named it. EC Classroom Interior Finish upgrades. So I think what we had talked about earlier was, like, some of it, I think, was even like adequate restroom facilities and stuff like that. Is
That's
that
correct.
possible in this amount of funding, or is that
Yes,
intended
yes.
to be part of that?
We were still able to highlight that as well as a need and based off the funding received that
Okay.
we'll get, that we decided that would still be a go.
Okay, great.
Mr. Atherton?
Thank y'all so much. I just want to echo it. It's much easier to read and understand and clear on how we're separating out the money. One of the questions I have that I probably ask every time is the transportation facility for Chapel Hill. How is that being accounted for? Because it's not on the Wolford report and it's not on ours, but we're the head.
Right. So I was able to get an answer for you,
Okay.
since we did not bring it up in February 29th. Maybe that didn't tell, but I did reach out to the county, and there's no expectation for us to be able to have to pour money into the facility at Chapel Hill. They did know, they pointed out that was something previous. I want to say, was it the 16 bond they had mentioned? I forget. That there was a talk of being able to pour money into both those facilities, but there was not an expectation based off our funds to have to pour into that.
So let me ask differently. Is there needs for repair or anything in the Chapel Hill facility where it will have to be addressed, right? My concern is not, do we need to use our money for it? My concern is it's not accounted for in our plan or their plan. And then if it does come up, is this going to make it to where the county has to make a decision to allocate funds to do that? I'd rather us be upfront with the county, with the Chapel Hill about how is that. I have no idea what the condition of that facility is. I should say that up front. But I do know it's an older facility because we talked about having a combined transportation. So I think it's worth the conversation to at least understand if there's needs. And whether we bring it up to the county that there are needs, or we ask Chapel Hill to bring it up, I think it's important. So we say we've done our due diligence in that.
I definitely can circle back with that conversation, flipping it back to the county and saying, hey, we've identified these needs, and, you indicated to us that we didn't have to use our funding to do it, so where we're going to look at. So I'll definitely circle back with that conversation.
Thank you. The other one I had is the K-5. I really appreciate y'all looking at that and coming back with a recommendation. I would just like to ask, as we build that out, we build it similar to what we did with Cedar Ridge, with the ability to expand it. So if the opportunity for a K-8 or pre-K or whichever comes up, we do have the footprint and the infrastructure built out to have those modules added on. Because as we've learned, I think over the years, it's much easier to do that than find new space and build on.
Right. We've had those conversations, in particular with the Cummings Group and Chris, and as he's indicated, facilities that are built these days, in essence, you want to have that infrastructure where you can expand if needed.
All right, I have one last one. So when do we sit down with Wolford and have the consolidation of, this was their original recommendation, here's what we've come to make sure in the prioritizations and review of this, that we're in alignment and there's a good understanding of the approach for us.
Right. So the county have asked that they want this in April, in essence. So we're right in alignment to being on track with that timeline. I know we have the meeting on Wednesday, and that's, in terms of they having that said specifically April, in terms of a date. But we're right in alignment, if we get approval here, to be able to, tie up loose ends, to be able to present and provide to the county and to Warpert. This is our plan, and for them to be able to identify. So they did say sometime in April.
I would like us to try to get with Wolford before we present it to the county, and that way we at least understand if there's some issues or concerns they have, and it doesn't become a public discussion before we have a chance to address it. I'm just a single board member, but that would be my preference.
And I'll echo that, because especially one of the things that was built into the Wolpert plan was swing space, right? So they built the facilities up front to avoid the cost for swing space, and obviously that's not in there. So, we want to hear from them, that's all, before this goes too far. The other question, I just want to make sure there's no intention here to eliminate our mobile units across the district, just in the interest of transparency.
Not currently on this plan.
Ms. Smiley?
Okay, last thing, on the slide 8, page 8, the CIP projects, if there's one thing I've learned as a board member, it is that you cannot do life cycle mechanical in any building for $35,000, or like a roof replacement for $135,000. So is this like partial funding for these projects? Like this is for like maintenance, administration, annex. There's like small numbers here that I know cannot actually fund the list of projects that are here. So what's going on there?
All right, so.
It might be the next page after this one.
And I'll say this first, that over the last few presentations, we've had to adjust the number, right? For the products in particular. But I'll have Hank dive into specifically what portions of things would now go to what's outlined for that we outline in the project, in terms of how much can get done now with that funding.
And I think whoever's controlling the slides, it's the next one after that, I believe. Yes.
So which one are you questioning?
Well, really, okay, so the maintenance department item, and the administration annex 2 item, and really even the first administration annex, doing roof and life cycle mechanical and life cycle plumbing, and that seems real low for that. So I guess it's all three of those.
So those facilities are small, real small. So their overall need isn't as huge. It's similar to shingling your roof with both of those facilities.
Okay, and the maintenance department?
Maintenance
And
department,
it's small, but it's not tiny.
but it's not all of it needs it.
Like the roof needs to be replaced or whatever.
Yeah,
Okay.
not the 4 buildings we have, 1 roof might need it, not 4.
Okay. Okay. All right. So we think these are good numbers for those, just because of the size of the buildings and everything. All right, great. Thanks.
Any other comments? I too would like to echo, thank you all very much. This is very easy to read, very easy to understand for those of us that are not mechanical or carpentry oriented. So thank you very much for your work on this. Much appreciated for everybody. Okay, it is recommended that we approve this recommendation for the new elementary school and the CIP projects tonight. So do I have a motion to?
I have a motion, is it approval to send it to Wolpert, right? Do we get it back from Wolpert before we do a final approval? I mean, approval means it goes to the county or it goes to Wolpert? Or what is the approval? What's the
Approval-
next, what are we approving it?
That you're approving a K-5 school as opposed to a K-8.
Okay.
Number one, and number two, you're approving the related CIP projects with the remaining funding that's associated with it is the approval.
Okay, and then if Wolpert comes back, I'm just saying, and says blah, 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 and they wanted you to make a change, does it come back to us? Are we approving it to go to Wolpert? Or are we approving it to never see it again?
Well, you'll see it again because, again, it has to go to both the county and the Warwick to determine phasing of the projects, and as well as the timeline for funding and the like would be the next step. But we wanted to certainly start with the K-5, which we've done, it sounds like, and then related projects would then associate it with it, and then it's moved on from there. But not as a point where changes could not be made or things along those lines.
It's a great step for where we are. I just think it sounds like we just need a little bit more, that the conversation with Wolpert has to happen before we can approve it to go to the county.
Well, that's what the county wants us to do in terms of it going, these lists of projects going to both the county and Warwick to determine that phasing.
So I'm a little confused. Should we approve it to go to Wolpert and then come back to us, or
Well, we
approve it
can't, if we
unless-
don't have a decision on what we have outlined, then nothing can go to Warwick or nothing can go to the county.
Then I move to approve this project plan to go to Wolpert.
Again, it's not necessarily the approval to go to Warwick, but we are approving both the K-5, which we've done, it sounds like,
We as a
and the
board
projects.
are
of Green.
approving this school and the CIP.
And these projects.
And these projects.
Right.
And we're approving it. We're saying we want it. And
Okay.
that we're ready for it.
Just want to add, you will have other discussions about the bond and the use of the bond proceeds. There'll have to be an actual referendum, and then the county will have to determine, there'll be conversations and
Absolutely.
multiple agreements. So you're not necessarily locked in, but as I understand, the administration's asking for direction on, is this the plan to proceed with it this time?
And so I will move this plan. I just would like, if Wolpert has if something comes up and a major problem, it will come back to us, right? If you're going
Absolutely.
to make change. So we're going to approve
Because
this
again-
plan. If it changes, you'll bring it back to us.
You will see, based off the conversations that the county has for phasing and Woolpert has, in terms of what the phasing and for these projects will look like.
Okay.
All right,
so
but
I'll
we
move to-
cannot do that without having direction on what we have outlined.
Then I'll move to approve this plan for next steps.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Okay. After school.
All right, good evening, Chair Purcell, Vice Chair Richmond, members of the board, Dr. Jones, and our listening community. I want to thank you for the opportunity to share this update regarding the after-school program and our recommendation for outsourcing of the program for the 2024-2025 school year. As we walk through this process, I plan to touch on the background of the after-school program, the recent request for vendor proposals, our committee's review process, as well as our recommendation and next steps. Before we begin, I would like to publicly thank all of our after-school program staff for their daily commitment to our students and our families and their patience this year through transitions in leadership. Additionally, I wish to thank our review committee for their time and commitment to this RFP review process, while they're also juggling many day-to-day responsibilities as well. So the after-school program has traditionally been run internally as an enterprise fund. Over the course of the last few years, there have been multiple leadership transitions within the program. In late January, I was informed that oversight of the after-school program would be transitioned to myself with support from our director of MTSS. At that time, I was also informed that a request for proposal or an RFP had been created and posted to solicit local and national vendors for outsourcing of the after-school program. Currently, the after-school program serves approximately 420 students across all 7 of our elementary schools and all 3 middle schools. Families pay $60 a week for 5 days of after-school care, with a discount for families with 2 or more children in the after-school program and for children of Orange County Schools employees. All site-based staff are part-time, and there are currently 2 full-time program specialists who are supporting the day-to-day administrative components of the program. We are currently operating at a 5-star rating. It's important to note, though, that due to the duration of time we serve students in the after-school program, which is 4 hours or less, we are not required to be a licensed program. However, licensure has played a role in our ability to receive supplemental assistance for qualifying families through the Department of Health and Human Services. So during the pandemic, districts were held harmless to maintain their licensure status, which means we are currently operating at that 5-star status based on ratings that were conducted in the past. This grace period is ending in June of this year. And a new evaluation cycle will begin to determine our licensure status moving forward. To complete that licensure process, the Department of Child Development and Early Education, so DCDEE, they will be conducting observations with ratings in 3 particular areas: program standards, education standards, and quality points. The ratings are completed on a 7-point scale for each of those sections. You receive 1 point just for meeting minimum requirements. The highest you can earn in each of those categories is 7 points. However, credit is received for the lowest point total in a given area. So for example, when looking at the educational component of staffing, if an administrator or a site coordinator receives a rating of 7 based on their educational qualifications and training, but a group leader receives a rating of 4 based off of their educational background and training, then the total score for that section would be 4. So we must attain a rating between 13 and 15 to be considered 5-star. So what's our rationale for outsourcing? The RFP noted challenges in consistently staffing the after-school program, high debt levels, and past due accounts as a few of the factors leading to operational constraints. During the pandemic, OCS began offering before-school care options and continued staffing, but we experienced a reduction at that time in students participating in the program, which was a part of kind of the onset of some of this financial burden. Fortunately, during that same window of time, the governor did approve a stabilization grant that went into effect late 2021 into the 2022 school year. It provided needed funding to sustain and grow the program, but it was also based on the ability to increase staffing to continue accessing those funds. OCS experienced difficulty increasing staffing during that time, so those funds were reduced over time. During the winter of 2023, district leadership began exploring options to outsource the program, and thus the RFP was created. So I was tasked in early February to convene a committee to review vendor proposals, In an effort to make an informed decision, it was important to ensure the committee was composed of district leaders, school administrators, after-school program specialists, after-school program site coordinators, and those who are parent reps that have students in the program. The committee did utilize a rating system anchored to key selection criteria. Proposals were evaluated on the key criteria deemed to be in OCS's best interest, including cost to families, priority hiring of Orange County School staff, meeting safety and licensure requirements, academic program components, maintaining summer and intersession care, as well as employee discounts. So once the committee completed the rating process, all 4 vendors, we had 4 vendors that submitted, all 4 were invited to share more information with the committee about their program and to engage in a question and answer session. It is important to note here on the slide, you can see that vendor 4 was the highest rated, but vendor 4, it should have read 602 as the rating number. The original slide that was submitted read 604, and that was just a simple typo, but I wanted to make sure that we clarified that for this evening. So the selection committee or the review committee identified strengths within all of the vendors' proposals, and we are grateful for their commitment to the process and their interest in supporting our students, our staff, and our families. At the conclusion of the review process, the committee determined that the YMCA of the Triangle met all necessary criteria, and the YMCA had the highest overall rating. They are a local entity with a proven track record across multiple decades, serving the Greater Triangle community and neighboring school districts. Their flexibility, their willingness to find creative solutions to meet our needs stood out. The RFP noted that this partnership will initially be a 1-year engagement. Future years are contingent upon satisfactory performance from the vendor, and so that they were aware of that going in. Upon board approval, we will begin to map out all logistical elements with the YMCA through a formal MOU or Memorandum of Understanding. There are a few key actions, though, here that I want to highlight along the timeline, the first being around staffing. The Y has ensured us, Orange County Schools, that our staff will be given priority employment status through this transition. While position titles will match the Y's structure for position titles, the Y will continue to match the operating procedures that we have currently in place. So some examples here. So the Y Youth Director position, those are tagged to 2 or 3 sites each, meaning that they are boots on the ground in the buildings throughout the week. They are tagged to 2 or 3 sites each, and they operate in those spaces with students, with staff on a weekly basis. We do not currently have that layer of oversight. All right, so this would be a positive addition. The Y Youth Site Coordinator will be housed at each site, okay, and that does compare to our current structure, which is an OCS site coordinator that's at each site. The Y also has Y Youth Counselors that will be working directly with our students at each site, and that compares to our current group leaders that we have across each of our sites. Another element or layer to this is family support. The Y has committed to matching the current price scales for our families. So again, they've committed to our current price scales for the 24-25 school year. Summer day camp, intercession care, and teacher workday rates will be based off of our current OCS rates, or in a situation in which the program does not currently exist, that will be off of what the Y has as their rates. The Y does reevaluate rates annually and utilizes rate increases, but does so as a way to ensure appropriate wage compensation for staff year over year. So any future increases, if those do occur, would be done in an effort to support increasing staff wages. Family communication being another element of this timeline, there are 3 main avenues for parents, family members to lift up concerns to the YMCA. directly, one avenue is directly to the site coordinator, who will be at the program from start to finish each day. If they so choose to skip over the site coordinator, there will be the full-time youth directors that are, as I said, assigned to 2 or 3 schools that they can go to, who not only supervise those sites, but also will be working to support supervising those site coordinators. In addition to that, a confidential reporting hotline that connects directly to the WISE risk department is also available. Parents are given access to the contact information for all 3 of these communication avenues. And additionally, the WISE expectation of youth directors is for them to have regular touch points with our building principals, administrators 2 to 3 times a year to ensure that open lines of communication between the school and the WISE staff is occurring. And that's a proactive measure on the side of the Y, but we certainly can ask for more communication if that's something that's needed at the building level. In some instances, a parent may lift a concern during the school day. I mean, a concern could be brought up about after school in a parent-teacher conference. That can be funneled to the site coordinator from the OCS staff member who has fielded the concern, or it can be funneled to admin to be able to communicate that directly to the site coordinator. So a last area here along the timeline is around licensing. If chosen, the Y is confident to have full licensing by the start of the 24-25 school year. We, as Orange County Schools, will be the first district which the Y partners with in the triangle that's still requiring licensing. This makes the time frame for which the Y becomes 5-star somewhat unclear, but based on current estimates, it will be sometime within the 24-25 school year. Guidance that we've been provided thus far has been that for Orange County Schools that we would maintain our licensure status up until the 24-25 school year before transitioning that to the new entity if approved, because then there is a 6-month grace period window there where they would be able to work to accommodate that licensure status and make sure that it's fully in place during next school year. The Y does have a close relationship with the Division of Child Development and Early Education, and they have a dedicated learning and leadership department, which will help with that onboarding process. The Y is very aware of the value of completing this process to ensure that they are able to meet the needs of our families. And the Vice President for Youth Development with the Y will be responsible for carrying out this licensure process. I do want to note a couple of final points that our outside agency partners, so the Department of Health and Human Services, DHHS, they have stressed that unless we have someone that is in a full-time director role over the after-school program who is a full-time point of contact, that is their kind of #1 main priority for school-age programs, that it does limit effective oversight if you don't have that in place. And so right now, we are not currently working effectively in that manner. So I do want to point that out. And so as we enter this final stretch of the school year, I do want to be clear that if the decision is delayed, we will not likely meet the existing licensing criteria just because we're thinking of a timeline right now when we're heading into the new school year, which means many of our families that do rely on that supplemental assistance would not be able to receive that per the licensure status. Now, if approved, the YMCA has committed in the coming weeks and months to meet this aggressive timeline, to be fully operational by the kickoff of our year-round schooling in July, as well as our traditional calendar in August. And so I'm going to pause there and open it up for questions.
Mr. Anthony?
So, Dr. Gammon, thank you so much. I know that this has fallen in your lap, literally, and really appreciate your work and all the staff's work around this. I first want to say that, I was kind of confused by the outsourcing, looking at that. Orange County After School has historically been a well-run, well-financed group that's funded itself, and as you mentioned, many students take advantage of it. One of the things that concerns me is there was a restructuring last year that removed that position that kind of put us in this position of where we're trying to struggle to get all of these things back in place. My really big concern is the vouchers and people not realizing if you're not at least 3-star rated, you cannot accept those, and you would have to go elsewhere outside of Orange County, which now means parents that are really in need of this can't do that. Also, it may not be obvious to the listening community that currently, I believe it's called dual employment, where our after-school staff actually is a employment under our school and under after-school. And so when they're working beyond the 8-hour day, they're getting paid overtime.
Yep.
And so with this, they would not get that because now they would be working for the YMCA, nothing against them, but that essentially changes the dynamics of our staff that are dependent on that. So, I mean, I could go on about a lot of things, but I would really just like to ask the question, you know, have we really looked at this and thought about, is there something else we could do to get us back to where we were, to have that position in place, have the oversight, and ensure that our community is getting this benefit? Our teachers and staff who love these kids, have been doing this, you know, need the money, can benefit from it. Is there something else we can do besides just voting to move this out, especially seeing that they're going to have to go get licensure anyway, and we have it? So I'd just like to ask, you know, either you, Dr. Gammon, or Dr. Jones, is this a possibility for us to have some more thoughtfulness around this before trying to outsource it?
Yeah, and I do want to echo thanking the team. This literally did fall in their lap. There's no one here that's presenting that ran after school or that's responsible for the current state that we're in. So thank you for your hard work. And, you know, as I'm entering into Orange County schools, the train was already moving. So I'm hopping on this moving train. I would ask, Dr. Gammon has been instrumental in the research, having known nothing about after-school programming. If he could walk us through a little bit of what it might take for us, just for what he may know now, and then we can come back at a later date and maybe look at that in April, if we have the resources to pull that together. You know, our fear is not having the opportunity for our students to have somewhere to go after school. And I think this was kind of that last-ditch effort. But if you know of what it might take, Dr. Gammon, briefly to speak on that, and then if we have to come back, we can do that as well.
Yeah, I do know that, and I guess to one of the points that you made, and I definitely understand as far as when we think of current staff that are working during the day and then they're serving in the after-school program, a couple of points there, and I think this lends itself to your point, Dr. Jones, as far as us being able to look at options. I noted some of these prior to, because this was something that bubbled up for us, that was not directly written into the RFP. Okay, so in the RFP that we received, it did not note that point, which I think it's an important point that you raised. In communication with the YMCA, they're very much aware of that at this point, that we do have, groups of staff members that would fall into that category. So there are some options that we could consider. We could decide between, honoring those current wages as they stand. If we look at it through that lens, then we have to start looking at where's the give and take? Like, is there an increase in fees on the other side of that to make that happen? Are there other local, agencies or partnerships from grant funding standpoint that they could pursue to be able to make that difference up? Could be an option. They're very flexible and committed to pursuing that. I think a third kind of thought process or thinking there is, do we grandfather that in where we make sure that we make make that right for folks that are currently in that transition, but in future years, is that not the way that they operate? I mean, that's just another way to look at it. So I do think there are other options. I think to Dr. Jones's point, that gives us space to explore those, but that also is really a part of the partnering process to really start to iron out what those logistics are.
And mainly, are we able to do what it takes to get the licensing? I think that's the question. Do we know what those steps might look like? And is that something that we would be able to pull together? I think because I don't know what those steps are, if you could talk a little bit about that.
So I will say that I'm never going to use I'm not going to say it's impossible. Okay, would it be extremely challenging? Yes, with the timeline that we're working upon. And I think what I mean by that now, to your point, we're talking about a 5-star rating, okay, because that's what it's been. Now, if there are conversations around there being concessions with that where we look at a 4-star, a 3-star rating, then that changes the conversation some as far as where we can go internally at that point.
Okay, so let us bring that back.
Yeah.
Let us bring back what it takes to be able to accept the vouchers for our students, the 3- and 5-star ratings, and then what it might take for us on the district end to do that. And we can bring that back so that then you can decide between outsourcing or us revamping a program, knowing it is going to take a dedicated person to do that, and we can look into that.
So let me just pose one other thing, is that we have in past used outside contractors to help us who are very knowledgeable about the programs and the requirements. And, I think we should be considering that as well. Besides, I just worry about the team trying to figure it out themselves versus bringing in someone that's familiar with our program that we've used before and them coming in to help as part of that. But again, I'm a single board member. I don't know how everybody else feels, but I feel like we shouldn't just punt this. But anyway.
Dr. Moore has a question. Thank you, Mr. Gammon, for taking this on. And Mr. Atherton, thank you for sharing your concerns, because I had some of the same concerns too. A concern that I have is about transportation. So when I worked after school at the elementary level, the students just transitioned from their class to the after-school program within the school building. So on one of the documents, I read that the school district will not provide transportation for after school. So I'm wondering if there has been any discussion with the YMCA, because I'm thinking of parents that may pose a problem for them, because now they will have to make 2 daily trips or make arrangements versus just having to come to the school afterwards and pick their student up.
So my understanding through this process is we would keep operations the same, meaning that students that are at their current school, they would remain there for the after-school program. The YMCA would come to our sites and they would run the program just like we're doing now, so they wouldn't have to be transported.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Hauser?
Yeah, I have some more basic questions. I agree with Will. I also wonder if there's a different model where, by the way, I appreciate what you've done, and I also think very highly of the Y, so I think that's a good choice for it. And I think we've worked with them in the past on after-school type programs. So is it possible for them to give us, for them to be the quote consultant, but it continues to be our program? So that's one option. But my other question is about the employees. So will the Y, let's assume we did this, would the Y match our compensation for our employees? And how would it affect their benefits if they're state employees?
Yeah, so what I can answer this evening is that their intention would be to match the current pay that our employees make. Now, I don't have specifics getting into the benefits piece and all that. I would talk with Rhonda about that.
But they would no longer be state employees, right? So they would not, would they be?
Correct.
Their benefits would not be impacted in this situation, because anyone who is, you have to be in a status of over 20 hours a week to be able to receive benefits. So everyone who is in the program that would be dual employed are already receiving benefits from their primary job. So the other individuals who work just after school don't meet the 20-hour-a-week minimum anyway, so they're not receiving benefits now. So it would not impact them.
So the dual employment, if we have people in dual employment that get involved, their benefits would?
No, they would not be impacted because they already meet the threshold for the requirement to get the
For
benefits on their primary job, be it a teacher assistant, bus driver, or cafeteria.
Thank you.
Ms. Molly?
Yeah, I mean, I just, I think these are good points that folks are raising, but, you know, personally, I'm in favor of moving forward with this program right now. It seems like it was a thoughtful review process where they're going to match our rates for staff members. I understand the overtime thing is a different question. I do think there's a financial sustainability of the program question there. Just thinking about the turnover we've had in those staff roles and the level of disruption that causes to the program when that happens, I am in favor of outsourcing to a very reputable vendor who runs after-school programs in lots of our surrounding districts and, you know, holding them responsible for leading those programs rather than, you know, this kind of situation that we find ourselves in at the moment. You know, long-term, I am concerned about what would happen to the rates over time. You know, but I understand that this is sort of a one-year version, and presumably if it got so expensive that we didn't think our families could afford it, we could always bring it back in-house, you know. So, you know, I appreciate the concerns, but personally I'm in favor of transitioning to this extern to the Y to run this for us.
Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate the conversation and also had some questions about compensation, partly because we're bringing in another, you know, dynamic with outsourcing. So it seems like we'd have less, you know, there would be overhead for working through the Y. And I'm wondering, have we ever gotten to where we have been charging at the middle school level? Because that was a lack of funding we had for a long time. We were providing, you know, free after school. Is that something that we have now built in? I know we've talked about it multiple times, and I don't remember exactly where we are with that. So I do have like a financial question, but I also agree that this is, I think the stability of doing this for a year could be really good, and I do like the additional site oversight component that's built in here. So I appreciate the plan, but I do have a question about that financial piece.
Yeah, so the way the RFP was crafted, this would be at no cost to us.
Okay.
Because they are operating within our facilities, they would be handling all programming. So that piece, and as far as middle schools, we do have a middle school, like a fee schedule that is in place there as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Atherton?
Can you tell us the fund balance for the enterprise fund for the after-school program? I mean, we've heard financial issues, so I'm curious to know the amount.
At June 30th of 2023, the fund balance that was reported in the audited financial statements was roughly 1.2 million.
So financial statements is really talking about us recovering money from the people not running the program based on that amount. Is that fair?
Well, there's, I don't know if I'm speaking here. There's definitely a concern about money that we are bringing in. I think that has been a large concern, not just this year, but that has also been in preceding years as well.
Right, and that's really focused, if you will, on the management of the program and making sure there's a person dedicated to doing that. And I do understand the disruptions, but with another vendor, if somebody leaves, you're still having the disruptions, right? That doesn't go away. And it could be people from outside the school district at that point. And even if they guarantee the pay for the current staff, any new people would come under their the rate that, what was it? $10 an hour? What's the rate? It's $10 an hour? So there would be a significant difference when new people came in. So if somebody in the staff decided to come in, they would not come in with the benefits that they would, cost structure that we have.
Right. Well, that would be a conversation through the agreement with the Y, like if they are approved. I do want to point out too, to your previous point, I think one piece that's important to note is that if there are departures or if there are oversight concerns, our ability to fill those quickly now is I don't want to use non-existent, but it takes a while, whereas a reputable program like that, they would have folks that are highly trained that can immediately fill into those spaces, just because their bandwidth is larger than ours currently in the way that we're structured. So that's important to note.
Right, and that's, again, because of not really having dedicated resources and also not necessarily incentives that we could use from the fund balance to help with that. Not our fund balance, but the fund balance of the program.
Can I just get clarification? The stabilization grant was a $2.5 million grant, right? So does that commingle with so the 1.2 million includes the funds from the stabilization grant? How will that be affected? How is that, and how much time is left on that grant? And
So the grant has sunsetted. Yes, it is completed. In regards to if the program, if the decision is made to outsource the program, I'm going to have to spend some time looking at what is in fund balance to ensure that there's not any issues with whatever may have, if anything there is received from that grant.
so to me, it begs the question of, so as part of the 1.2 million is more than I would have expected for you to have in that. Is that because of this?
It is definitely because of the stabilization grant.
Yeah, so so let's take the fund balance away. Is the proposal from the Y, does it sustain it? Is it sustain itself, or is it going to drain the fund balance?
So from my understanding, it is not going to cost Orange County Schools anything, $0, if we turn this program over to the Y. What is left in fund balance is the property of Orange County Schools. So it would be Orange County Schools funds. I would have to ensure that there were no caveats associated with what was received as a part of the stabilization grant to make sure I've got to really do some research and dig in about those funds to ensure that they don't have to be given back.
And are any of those funds fees from parents? And so there's no commingling in that way? Okay.
No, it's primarily all associated with the stabilization grant.
Great, thank you.
I have one last comment.
Yes, ma'am.
So I just to be mindful that if we have potential compliance issues and not enough staff to manage the sites, which has happened over time, that can create a huge safety issue for our district. So it may be feasible for us to move forward with the plan so that we can stay in compliance. Just kind of remember safety first.
And if I can just add, again, I just want to reiterate that what they were asked to do was to bring a proposal to outsource and what that would look like. There was no conversation about outsourcing or maintaining our program here. The directive given to the team in January was outsourcing and what that would look like. We will do what you ask, whatever you need us to do to feel comfortable with it. So we have a proposal for outsourcing. I think they did a outstanding job with what they had, and considering that there are no staff here that are experts in aftercare. At the same time, if we need to explore what it would take to get our licensure, we can do that as well and bring that back. Now, to the downside to that is it may take us some time to do that. Yes, we can contract folks in, but there's no guarantee that we could do that in time for families in the year-round program to have aftercare programming. And so that is where I'm torn coming in the middle of this, while this was already in motion. But whatever you decide, we will go back and do.
Mr. Atherton?
So, Dr. Jones, just to follow up, do you have concerns with doing that? Do you feel like we're putting children at risk if you go look at that, or do you feel like that is not a good use of time?
Number one, I'm concerned with putting this on staff with the time that might take for staff to go back and do. Number two, I'm concerned about the possible outcome of us not having the ability and missing the opportunity to offer something to kids that need it the most. I mean, we can have an after-school program in the summer that doesn't have the 3 to 5 star rating, and that means that students that need it the most won't have access to it. So not knowing, like I said, all of the details and what it will take and the timeline, I would have to dig a little bit deeper into that to really fully understand what it would take, the impact it would have on staff's time and our ability to get that done in this quick turnaround, to be able to say for sure how I felt either way. Like I said, the teams, I'm on this train midway, but the team's directive was to bring outsourcing.
I want to just ask again, because I think I heard it right. Our staff is going to have first choice at jobs for this after-school program.
That's correct.
That is in writing somewhere that that's going to happen.
If this is approved and we work through that, that would be in writing, yes.
It is in the RFP,
It's in the
but
RFP.
it's carefully crafted in the RFP because you can't dictate the operations of another entity. So I don't think there's any way to say you shall hire every single Orange County School staff member. However, there's a very strong preference for that in the RFP, and my understanding is the vendors expressed interest, not just willingness, but interest in hiring those people to staff the operation.
I understand that, but I want to make sure that the people that we have in this district are given priority over someone else.
And I do think there's an interview process that they would have to go through with the YMCA. But yes, I did see that they would give priority. That was one of the criterias within the rating system.
Okay. Yes, sir.
One last question, hopefully, on the cost of the program. We started with at $60 a week, and we hadn't talked about what they will be offering. Is it the same, or is it changing based on shifts?
So the communication that we've received through the RFP process is they would maintain the same fee structure.
Okay.
For 1 year.
For 1 year.
Well, we have, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, at the end of 1 year, can we opt out of this, or we just keep going?
Yes. Or you could opt out or renegotiate. We've also included as an essential term in the contract that the vendors agreed to assume a termination for convenience clause that would allow you to terminate the contract mid-year. I forget the notice period, but something like 60 days notice.
Okay, good.
And do we have a say in the fee? So if they want to hike the fee by 10% and we don't, can we offer to subsidize it, for example? Do we have any say in fee increases? And it's a year away, but can we?
Again, I think that could be a term that's negotiated. And we don't yet have a memorandum of understanding for this year, but that would, because it was an RFP term, it's something that would be reflected in the contract. There would be parameters on fees, and if you were to renegotiate a future contract for another year or longer term, you could do the same then.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to name. I think that it is because the increases in staff hourly rates in the program were funded by the stabilization grant. I think it is unlikely that if we I think it is likely that if we kept the program, we would also have to significantly increase rates in order to have a financially sustainable program. Is that accurate?
I believe that would, yes.
So in either case, I think it is likely that there's going to be some rate increase, but maybe not in the first year of this YMC one, but over time, given what staff need to be paid, I think it's unlikely. I mean, it will likely be more expensive in either case. So.
Okay. Yes, sir?
So, given everything we've heard, motion to approve.
Okay, second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you all so much for your work, because I know this has not been easy. Thank you. All right. Retesting.
And good evening, Board Chair, Ms. Purcell, Vice Chair, Mr. Richmond, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Jones. I am pleased to present to you this year's remediation, re-administration of our end-of-year, end-of-grade, end-of-course assessment plan. Last year, I shared with you what the state is allowing school systems to, as an option for our end-of-the-year assessment. And this year, we are opting, we would like to opt to participate again in the remediation, re-administration of our end-of-year assessments, with some slight changes for this year, and I want to point out those changes. I have my banner over here helping. So one of the things that we're putting in place from last week at the Student Achievement Committee, we talked about the final stretch plan. And the final stretch plan is what principals are working on now for the final 9 weeks, looking at skill boosting, test taking strategies, small group instruction. What are they doing to prepare students for the end of the year assessments? That's the plan for all students. Part of the remediation reassessment is that they're focused on students who need to retest for the end of the year, EOGs, EOCs. The state gives some restrictions. The state only allows us to do that after you have finished the testing period, and that students have gone through the readministration part. They do allow us to do skill boosting for everyone. So between now and the beginning of the testing, we expect that schools are very deliberate, very focused with everyone in preparing students for that end of the year testing. We also expect that schools are very strategic in how they are designing their testing window. The testing window begins March 23rd for our year-round schools, May 23rd for our year-round schools, and May 24th for our traditional and middle schools. And they go through the end of the school year. For our secondary schools that are on semester courses, they begin that last week of school. Being strategic for the courses that they are planning to do the reassessment, we would like for them to begin the testing early in the testing window that allows them to finish the assessment, and then they can begin to work with the students who will be a part of the re-administration. They can begin that very small, very focused group at the conclusion of the testing, and then do the testing after the school year ends. We are extending the testing days from 1 day to 3 days this year to give a longer window for the assessment. so that students will have 1, 2, and probably no more than 2, but if some choose to administer for 3 assessments, it gives them that time period to do it. So you will see that the remediation day for our traditional elementary, middle, and high schools will begin on Monday, the 10th, and for our year-round will begin on Thursday, the 6th, and then the 3 days of re-administration, retesting will be from June 11th through the 13th, and for year-round will be June 7th through the 11th. Communication, Ms. Doyle asked last week about the communication piece and making sure that our parents understand that schools will have the option for the re-administration so that students, families can, if they have the option to plan around and not plan their vacations right at the very end of the testing window. We expect that as schools work with students through the final stretch, they will have a sense of who will be invited for the re-administration and begin the communication process. So as part of the communication plan, we hope and expect that schools are in communication with families to inform them that there is a possibility that they will be invited for the re-administration, to plan for that, to not schedule for the last 3 days after the school year ends. And then once they have completed the testing, formal communication will go out to families, inviting students for the re-administration. So as part, go to the next one. So one of the things that are part of the non-negotiables that we will be communicating with our principals on is looking at the staffing. Who will staff the remediation and re-administration? Be very intentional about the staff that they're using. Unfortunately, we will not fund teachers to do this year. So you're looking at the staffing, not only their teachers, but also looking at the 11th month staff, their coaches that they have in building to assist with the program. How will they determine the students who need to be a part of the remediation and re-administration plan? And also, what is the communication plan, again, for notifying parents? And to be very intentional, be not only just using one form of communication, what are other ways that they're communicating with parents about the program to ensure that they're reaching out to every family and that students who are indeed eligible are taking advantage of this program. And the very last, thank you. So developing a communication plan, working with their families, making sure that everyone is informed right here. Also, the relationship that the schools are developing with their families is very important here. And we will assist as part of central office. Last week, you heard about our final stretch plan. We are in the process now of working with schools in developing those plans. Next week, we will be providing feedback to schools about the plans. And then between now and the end of the year, working with our schools on those plans, and then certainly following up with them as we get closer to the testing period and during the testing window. So we hope that with this very deliberate, very focused approach here, that we will see greater outcomes. And again, the re-administration, the retesting impacts proficiency. It does not impact the growth measures on a test. Are there any questions?
Ms. Doyle? Thank you, Dr. Green, and forgive me if I'm asking a question that possibly is answered in there. A couple were thinking about having like the one remediation day and then multiple re-administration days. Is there, would a student be able to take multiple tests if they don't have adequate time, retooling for each test. So I'm just kind of curious, would you really be able to go to 3 sessions and then take 3 tests in one day of remediation? So I have a question about that. I did like the sample scripts that were provided. I know that communication piece and encouragement to prioritize that is really important. And did you just say there's no pay for teachers and staff doing this?
Yes.
I just, because otherwise these teachers are off, right?
During 2 of the days, the 3 days for the traditional staff, for the remediation and the retesting are during the teacher workdays.
Okay, thank you.
The 2 days for the year-round here are during the teacher workday. One of the days is beyond the teacher workday. That's why we are also encouraging schools to look at their 11th month staff.
Thank you.
And we're extending out to 3 days to provide the options, not the requirement here. So they have to look at their students to see. And also the remediation can begin for the small group once the testing period ends. So
Okay.
during that window, when the testing period begins from May 24th through the end of the school year, if they start, for example, if they start with the science test first, and they finish with the science test by May 26th, they can begin the remediation on May 27th. So as soon as they finish with the test for that grade, they can begin that process before the end of the school year. They cannot do the retesting until after the school year ends.
Thank you. Ms. Molly?
Okay, I have a few questions. One, what were the outcome? You don't have to answer this right now, but I would like to know what were the outcomes last year of remediation. I remember seeing prior to that plan that in Wake, they had significant additional students end up passing the EOG. So I'm curious what that looked like for us, and I'd love to see what that looks like this year. Another idea I have or question, can we put this on the calendar when we're approving the academic calendar for each year? Like, can we know that far in advance? Because I think that would be helpful also for families as they're planning. And then who will be invited to, how are schools deciding? Presumably it's not every child who does not pass an EOG or EOC, or maybe it is. How are they deciding who will be invited to do the retesting?
We're asking schools right now, as they're looking at all sorts of data for students, and a significant data piece that helps will be last year's EOG performance, EOG, EOC performance. So as they're not only looking at this year's data, as they're working with students to get a sense of how students are performing, looking at last year's data, looking at EVOS data, BOY, MOY data, common formative assessment data here. Also, different resources as they're looking at the final stretch plan. They were provided with various resources. Also, some resources including some release assessments, EOG, EOC assessments to help gauge how students might perform on the end-of-year assessments. Will give them a sense of how students that are very close to passing and need that little extra nudge will be that group that they want to target.
So they're going to target students who maybe in the end, students who get a 2 on an assessment rather than but they seem like maybe they could be,
Right, just
rather than
right
a student
there.
who's pretty far off from proficiency, because one
That's correct.
additional day of remediation is not going to be impactful in that situation.
That is correct.
Ms. Hauser?
Yeah, first of all, I really appreciate how proactive you're being with this year. It's great. Just correct me if I'm wrong, but we did not do the skills boost targeted instruction. We didn't do that last year, did we?
We did some of it last year. We didn't. We were didn't start as far out as we're doing this year. So we are using the entire 9 weeks period to really be very comprehensive in the approach. And also not only looking at the final stretch plan, schools will be asked to develop the remediation reassessment plan that will identify eligible students, identify their plan for addressing remediation, as well as identifying the staff that they will use.
Yeah, so just a second, to clarify, the kids who do I'll just call it targeted instruction, that's in preparation for the EOGs, that's the test that counts. If they do the remediation, does that get considered in our end of grade scores for our kids, our schools, our district?
It will count toward proficiency.
It will?
It will not go in the growth part.
Okay,
So it will
but-
go toward the 80% part of that score, not the 20%.
So the retesting scores count for
Yes.
proficiency? Great.
Toward
Thank you.
proficiency.
Mr. Adson?
Thank you for this, and definitely like seeing how it's structured and understanding the timing and how it would be approached. One thing, this is voluntary, right? So
Correct.
you invite the parent, child, and if they say no, then they're not required to. I just
That's
wanted to
correct.
clarify that as a point. Thank you.
Ms. Smiley?
Just one other thought here. I believe in taking advantage of every day of instruction in a school year up until the very last day of school. And my experience as a parent has been, at least at the elementary school level, that a whole bunch of the last couple of weeks of school are like a lot of really fun activities and these kinds of things. And so it makes me wonder whether we are supporting schools and teachers in understanding any possible strategies for helping the need for additional remediation during that last few days of school to not feel like a punishment to a child, to help teachers understand how to structure that in a way where it isn't stigmatizing. It's really tough to be like, we're having all these fun activities, and by the way, we're gonna do, time to do some more math, like, thanks for taking those EOGs, like, time to do more math. Like, are we providing any support to schools on that?
You raise an important point here, and I think we have to be mindful of the approach that we're taking so that students don't feel like while others are out having the extra recess, I'm in doing the extra math problem here. That's an important conversation to have when we talk about the communication that schools are having with families. What is that? How does that communication look? How are we structuring our day? How are we balancing that time with our students so that they don't feel that I'm being punished? That what is the messaging that they're giving families? What is the messaging that they're giving students? That it is, we see potential in you. It is for that group of students that's right there on the edge. And that's what you want to make them feel that, you have, we know you have it, you can do it. Here's another opportunity, to showcase your skill sets. And so that's important, and that's what we want to remind our schools in helping our students end the year on a very positive and exciting note and not feel like, this is something, that they dread.
Let me just add, getting this approved tonight will allow us to work with principals. This will be a little bit of a shift from the previous year with having more days and more time to focus on remediation and the retesting. When we do that and we're working with principals, I make it very clear that this is not a punishment for students. And I've done that in the past. And yes, in Durham as well, we saw some great results with our retesting. It is a nice way to give a push, but at the same time, we're dealing with children. And we want to make sure there are end-of-the-year activities that they're not missing out on, because we do want to continue to work with them and motivate them to succeed academically. So, yeah, that will be made clear with working with principals through the end of the year until we get up to that point. And whatever support they need in doing that, we'll be happy to help them. Also, to address the concern with teachers, we want to provide some support for principals to make sure that our teachers aren't feeling overwhelmed during those work days, right? Having to retest and at the same time closing out the school year. So we'll be working with them with that as well.
And also, this is not just a CNI plan. We have the equity department, we have our EC department, an ML department right here, our student service department, working through to ensure that we are indeed looking at all aspects and that we are inclusive and not missing out on any parts. You know, that the social emotional element of this. So thank you for raising that point.
Any other questions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. It is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
Well, I'm going to stay up here, and hopefully this will be short and sweet. I want to present to you the school fees. We are recommending no increase in school fees for next year. Here you will see in the abstract here the proposed fees for next year, the same proposed fees as we had last year. We are also continuing to purchase the recorders at the elementary level. Those will be the musical instruments. Also, we will support the high schools and their musical programs, and you will see the variance there because of the different competitions that the high schools take part in. And a couple of fees that we are removing because we no longer do them, so we're not carrying those items on that. So what will be posted will not include the library fee and the technology fee that's listed there. So I ask your approval of no fee increase on the school fees.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Sorry,
Hey, Ms. Rath.
Good evening, Chair Purcell, Vice Chair Richmond, board members, Dr. Jones, and all of our community. I am here this evening to walk you through the superintendent's recommended budget for the 24-25 school year. First, our budget calendar. At our budget meeting that occurred on February the 29th, we had some discussions about the recommendations for the budget that we are bringing forward. We are here tonight to formally present those to you. At your next meeting on April the 8th, we will be holding a public hearing to allow for the public to make any comments in regards to the recommended budget. We will also follow up at that meeting with discussion from you about those items that you want to add or take away from the superintendent's budget, or potentially keep it as it is to carry forward to our county commissioners. We will then bring it to you for final approval on April the 22nd. It will then be submitted to the Board of County Commissioners as our recommended request for funding for the next school year. I always like to start these presentations with kind of taking us back to the previous year and picking us up where I left you off the last time we talked about this. So I want to point out that some things that we were able to fund with the additional money that we received from the commissioners last year. We were able to fund the increases that were in the biennium budget for the salaries as well as the benefits. We also were able to hire 4 high school security staff. We were able to add a multilingual learner teacher. We were able to add 2 health technicians. We kept the permanent daily subs for each of the schools. We were also able to hold the schools harmless for 3 state-funded positions that were lost as a result of our decrease in our average daily membership. And then we also earmarked one-time grants for our schools for them to have the ability to submit applications of things to enhance learning opportunities, tutoring, et cetera, throughout this school year where they had total flexibility to be able to utilize those funds. That was $4.2 million. And for those things that we weren't able to fund. The focus last year, from you, rightly so, was a big push to try to keep staff compensation a top priority. However, we just weren't able to do that with the additional funds that we received. So all of those compensation items that we had very thoroughly discussed last year, we were not able to fund. Those included looking at our local supplement tiers and increasing those. It included looking at adding additional supplements for specific populations. It also included additional supplements for staff who had longer years of service with the district. We also looked at some STEM opportunities, particularly looking at adding more STEM teachers at each of our schools, as well as the percent step increase that would have taken to get the classified scales for each years of experience equaling 1%. And then a few of the other items that you see here that were a top priority of yours that we were not able to fund also were the national board certification, some additional nurses, increasing some athletic supplements, and district-sponsored field trips. All in all, the total of these unfunded requests was $8.2 million. Now let's talk about where we are now. This year, our projected ADM for the coming up year is 6,990. I want to take an opportunity for the public as well as to remind everyone here that there was a session law that changed the way school districts are going to be funded. So DPI will no longer be projecting average daily memberships for school districts. They will actually be basing the funding on what your actual ADM is. So what that means for us is we will no longer be seeing reversions out through a school year where they are taking money back from us when we have decreases in our enrollment. We won't have adjustments for decreases in ADM, nor will they be charter school adjustments, which we have typically received as long as I have been in this position. They do have terminology built in and procedures built in if a school district's ADM does start to increase, where they will provide you per pupil funding for those increases that you see. As you can see here, our total overall student billing base for the next fiscal year is projected to decrease 67 students when you factor in the increase in our charter school enrollment and then take out those students who are considered out of district and not paying tuition. Wanted to show you what the trend for the last 10 years has been for Orange County schools. As you can see here, the blue bar is the total. The yellow line is the DPI projected ADM where they have projected us annually, and actually the purple line is where we actually were. So as you can see, for all but 2 years of the last 10, we've actually been under the DPI projected. And of course, you can see that our charter schools are continuing to increase and are actually at 1,092. Here, what I wanted to provide you is a look at Orange County schools against a look at the state of North Carolina. And overall, Orange County Schools is reporting a 5% decline in total enrollment. The number of white students enrolled in Orange County schools has declined 14% since 2020, while the number of Hispanic students enrolled has increased 6%. It is important to note that this is just not an Orange County schools phenomenon. The state of North Carolina is also reporting a 10% decline in the number of white students enrolling in public schools and a 10% increase in the Hispanic enrollment for the same period of time. Additionally, overall, the state of North Carolina has shown a 3% decline in enrollment. Here is a look at our 13 schools and how they have trended over the last 5 years. As you can see here, 3 schools experienced an increase in enrollment, while the remaining 10 schools did see a decline in enrollment. So let's talk about our continuation budget. When you factor in the number of students that we are projected to have in our school district next year, and remember that number of students equals funding because we are funded based upon those bodies in those seats, that comes to $42.4 million based upon what we think are going to be here next year. When you factor in the other revenues that we receive from the county, which are our fines and forfeitures and our interest, we're looking at anticipated revenues of $42.6 million. We know from the biennium budget, the anticipated increases in salaries for next year are 3% for staff, and there are also benefit increases. When we look at those, as well as the increases that we're experiencing in our non-personnel related costs, we're looking at needing $1.9 million to bridge the gap between what we're projected to receive and what we're projected that we're going to pay out. In regards to our expansion budget, these are the items that we are recommending that be included for consideration for request. A 0.5 of a custodial, and this is to support the increased square footage that is associated with the partnership expansion. Also, the percentage increase to represent a 1/2 step between the classified salary scales would be $500,000, excuse me. We also recommend that we carry back and continue to advocate for certified supplement increases for this the certified licensed staff to increase those local supplement scales. We also have on here the recommendation to continue the partnership with the NC Ed Corps tutoring. Also to look at adding additional resources for STEM/STEAM in our schools, and to provide training for our teachers and coaches to facilitate the integration of these programs into our current curriculum. And then the district-sponsored field trips of $200,000. That would bring our total expansion requests to $3.1 million, and overall, including continuation and expansion, we would be short $5 million. So that would basically equate to a $636 per pupil increase that would be needed over what we received this fiscal year to fund all of these items. Wanted to give a quick update on our ESSER funds. What you see here are the remaining pots of ESSER money that we have available. The largest pot and the one with the most flexibility is the one, the very last line in the chart, which is the ESSER 3 funding. There is approximately $2.1 million that is remaining available in that pot that will be expiring in September of 2024. Here, we wanted to give you a look at how we plan to spend that ESSER $3 for the upcoming year. Again, to project that we will not be reverting any of those funds, that we will be utilizing those in support of our students and supporting additional instructional needs. The personnel expenditures are associated with the staff that are being funded from that grant right now. The tutoring is the additional tutoring that will continue up until the time that the grant sunsets. And then the summer programs for June of this year have been budgeted at $1 million. And then that leaves us roughly $398,000 for indirect costs, professional development, and contracted services. I do want to point out that all of the other grants that I showed on the previous page are very specific, and that we do have plans in place to also extinguish those funds. But I wanted to focus on what our largest balance was remaining in ESSER at this time. So I'm happy to say that right now, looking at what we're projected to end the year at, based upon where we closed out fiscal year '23, our fund balance was at $3.4 million. The board has assigned or restricted 1.2. So that left us approximately $2.2 million in our fund balance that was unassigned, unrestricted. Looking at how our budget is currently running, I'm anticipating that we will be able to add $500,000 to $1 million back to our fund balance for this fiscal year. So next steps. April the 8th, we'll have the public hearing and allow for input from the community as well as input from you on what you have seen in this budget that you would like to keep or take away, or any additional items that you would like to add before it is presented to the commissioners. We will bring any of those changes back to you on April the 22nd for final approval, and then that is what will be presented to our commissioners for consideration for funding. I do want to just say for any of the public that are listening that these items are recommendations, that this budget has not been approved, and we will not know what our funding is from the commissioners until early June, when they have heard all of the input from all of their individual departments and assessed their funding sources. They will make a determination of what our per pupil funding will be, and at that time, we will be able to set our final budget, and based upon that, we will be coming back to you or to have more discussion about if there are, hopefully, the continuation budget will be fully funded, and there won't be any need for us to have any discussion about finding funds that we're not receiving, and hopefully we'll be in a situation where we will prioritize our expansion request of some expansion items that hopefully we will be able to do. And now I'll take any questions.
Ms. Hauser?
So thank you for this. I have a when you presented to us in Budget Committee, there was some items that you were looking at redirecting existing funding to fund things like, and the thing that I remember is the increase in supplements for athletic coaches. And you were suggesting that you were looking at, can you do that, and can you do that without increasing the budget? And did I hear that right?
You did.
And were you successful in that? And the reason I'm asking is I would love for the public to know that you're doing that kind of work to redirect resources to things that are really important to our schools.
Yes, we had several items that were funded. I'm going to start with the items that were funded historically under ESSER, that we want to continue those initiatives. Instead of looking to the county to fund those, we made the decision to look internally. And I worked with the team, and we worked hard, and we scrubbed hard, and we gave up some things. And as a result, we were able to find the funding to be able to continue HMH, to also be able to continue Solution Tree, Branching Minds, and Panorama. And one of the other items was also a percentage increase to the coaches' supplement scales that we would be bringing forward to you as a budget proposal that we would fund internally when we finalize this budget.
So will those items be in the budget that you present on April 8th?
Mm-hmm.
Great, great, thank you.
Anyone else? Question on Mr. Atherton?
Just I guess a clarity question on the expansion budget request. On the items like the classified salary scale and the certified supplement increase, do we know how that will impact every year on our continuation budget? Or is it calculated in that, hey, if we do the classified salary scale at 1/2, that the 500,000 is going to cover it year over year? Or will we have to insert that into our continuation budget?
It will have to become part of our continuation budget based upon any raises that the governor legislates in his budget bill.
Okay, let me ask it differently.
Okay.
I get your point. I was thinking more when we talk about the certified supplement increase where we changed the scale to be 1% for each level. Independent of whether the state gives a raise, will we have to adjust for that? And the reason I'm asking is I do know that the county commissioners don't necessarily have to give us a continuation budget. And I just want to know if there's any additional funding we'll have to consider when we get to that point between each step level. So if you're at step 1 and now you're going to step 2, this is funding them where they're at versus, hey, I'm going to go from level 1 to 7, for example. Does it make sense what I'm asking?
So let me try to explain what I think I'm hearing.
Yes, please.
And maybe we'll figure out where we need to fill in the holes. So the $500,000 here, to get to where it is a 0.5% step increase, that would be a 1/8% that is needed, because right now we have a 3/8% step increase. So 1/8% for all of our staff currently paid on these classified scales, as well as the 3% budget increase that we know is in the biennium budget, will cost us $500,000 next year. So going forward, if there is another 3% increase in the next fiscal year, we're going to have, that will become part of our continuation and be a continuation increase to sustain that. Did I answer your question?
Well, no, but that's okay. So I shouldn't have even said the classified salary. I shouldn't have said the classified. The certified is the one I'm really interested in, because you have people that make different amounts throughout the scale. And when they go between the scales, they're going to increase by at least 1% each year. And so I'm curious if the 2 million accounts for it, independent of any pay raise by the state, or are we going to have to say, okay, this year, to put everybody on the scale, it's going to be 2 million, but next year you're going to shift, and now we need an additional 200,000 because they've got an additional 1% increase because they've moved on the scale. Does that make sense?
The 2 million takes into account everybody moving up one step on the scale.
Okay.
So it does take that into account for the 24-25 year.
But not, okay.
Ms. Smiley?
And I think one way to think about this is every year we sort of have this situation, regardless of these increases, where people are moving up a step in their years of seniority. And we never have to go to the commissioners to say, oh, our staff is slightly more tenured now, so we need X amount of dollars to make up the gap. Mostly, I think, because folks are dropping off of it also with more years of experience, and we're adding people with fewer years of experience, and so it kind of works itself out.
And yes, that's a very good way to explain it. And a lot of it does wash itself out because you have people coming in and going out at different years where that kind of washes itself out in totality.
But just, if I could clarify, if I remember when we did this, we said, we're raising the scale, so when you get on the scale, your salary will be higher, but we're not promising an increase as you move up in years in the scale. Is that correct? I remember having that conversation.
Are we talking about the certified supplement
Well,
increase?
I'm thinking about the classified, because I remember having that conversation when we talked about it, and I actually remember Wake County putting a statement at the beginning of their salary scale saying, no promises about increases year to year.
Yes, we did have that caveat as well because it would be dependent upon funding. Classified salary scales. So that's a salary scale that individuals are hired on
Right.
based upon your years of experience. And then each year that you get a year of experience, you move up a step and get a 3/8% increase right now.
So if the staff doesn't change at all, our classified payroll would go up, would increase by 3/8% in terms of cost.
And that's been
Technically.
accounted for in the continuation
Right.
budget.
Okay.
The local certified supplement scales are the local supplement that we provide to licensed staff that is over and beyond what the state sets on the state scales. So right now, ours are tiered. I believe it's 0 to 5 years is 12%, 6 to 14 maybe. I'm shaking cobwebs here. And we were looking at changing those to where they were a little higher on the low end for those 0 to 5 years is what we had looked at when we discussed this last year. So that is a little bit different scenario, but that is a percentage of your salary. So as your salary increases, your supplement is going to increase.
Got it.
Ms. Dorn. Thank you, Ms. Rath. I mainly just want to say I appreciate the presentation and our data about where our ADM is and the per pupil increase we'd need correspondingly for a continuation budget. I do like the recommendation for what we'd be putting in our expansion request in terms of, I'm really glad we're pushing to do the 1/8 classified salary scale. I know it never seems like big enough, but sometimes you just have to do piecemeal to keep making progress. I did read that the Chapel Hill Board is looking to increase their supplement, so we need to keep working on that. And the NC Ed Core tutoring seems to have been super beneficial. I know we're going to get some more information about what that actually looks like. And as you know, I've been a big advocate for the STEAM and STEM equity, and I like this approach. So I appreciate your plan regarding that in particular. Dr. Jones, thank you.
Ms. Smaller? At some future date, there are certain pieces in the ESSER 3 funding where we've heard or seen a decent amount about it in terms of the math enrichment tutoring or the summer career accelerator programs. But at some future point, I'd love to just know a little bit more about how some of these other pots of monies were directed. So on driver's ed, the homeless 2 category from Kenny Vento students, and the cyberbullying and suicide prevention, how we're planning on, or either retrospectively how we have or in the future how we're planning on targeting that funding. They're just some of them that we've heard a little bit more about than others.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Rath.
Thank you.
This looks good, and we look forward to hearing more. Just a reminder, what day, Ms. Rath, do we go to the county commissioners with this, so the public will know that if they want to know? Is it the 25th?
that date written down right here. It is April the 25th, when we have the joint school board meeting with the commissioners, where we will present our actual budget request to them at that time.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. Anything else we need to discuss tonight? All right.
Motion
Do
to
I-
adjourn?
Okay, motion to
Second.
adjourn, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.